no answers to the very many challenges. No,
sorry, I'm not just going to sit here and be compared to Enoch Powell.
Good evening, panel. Where should we house asylum seekers?
Right, well, the government planned to house asylum seekers in 2 military sites. That's the new plan, one in Inverness and one in East Sussex. Lisa?
Well, I come from a town where we were some of the earliest places to get asylum hotels under the last government, and it has been an absolute disaster. We've had people, very vulnerable people in our town who've been put there with no notice to the local community, to the police, to the members of parliament, to the council. We've had far-right racists outside protesting. We've had a media circus come to town when people are trying to go about their daily lives. And we've had people being locked into their hotel rooms and confined to their rooms for many, many hours at a time. And left there for a really long time with no real hope of getting a decision on their asylum claim and either being able to move on with their lives, work, contribute to the UK, or being removed from the UK if they've got no right to be here. So
what makes you think it's going to be any different with these barracks? I mean, Labour was very critical about the Conservatives when they put people in army barracks, and the barracks in Inverness, for example, it's right in the middle of the city.
Well, look,
so how is that different from being a hotel in the middle of the city?
The point that I was trying to make was that, first of all, we need to learn from the mess and the chaos that has been created. And the biggest lesson of all to take from that is, why did we have an explosion in the number of asylum hotels in the country? Why did we have all this strife and division in communities? It's because the last government effectively gave up on processing asylum claims. So you've got people languishing for years who could contribute to our country, and you've got all this chaos going on in communities. The single biggest thing that we've done that will make a difference to that is to process asylum claims again. We've doubled the rate at which those decisions are being made, and to bring some coherence to that system, where we were spending millions of pounds a day on asylum hotels at the height of the last government.
But you're going to be spending millions of pounds on these barracks?
No, instead you utilise government buildings, you make sure that you can house people decently and treat people with decency, because we're a warm, decent country. You process those claims quickly, and then those people who can stay and contribute get the chance to do so, and those people who can't are returned. It seems to me we just need to bring a bit of common sense back to what has been one hell of a mess over the last 15 years.
Matt?
Well, it's always interesting listening to a Labour politician talk about common sense, because that is the opposite of what is happening in this country right now. Everybody who's looking at the absolute shambles of the borders, everybody in this country is paying £15 billion to accommodate people who are often breaking our laws. These islands are known for having a sense of fairness. We created the idea of fair play. That is not what is happening in this country. We have governments, both Tory and Labour, which are incentivising people to break our laws, enter our country illegally, and, to be frank, putting women, children, our people at risk. That's what we've seen for much of the last week. From Walsall, Rhiannon White, the young mother stabbed in the head 20 times by an illegal migrant from Sudan. That's what we've seen in places like Uxbridge. That's what we've seen in places like Bournemouth. This is a complete shambles. We need to put the British people first, take control of our borders, leave the European Convention on Human Rights, repeal Tony Blair's Human Rights Act, and detain and deport anybody who arrives illegally.
Man here at the front in the grey shirt.
So the government clearly needs to get a better handle on illegal migration, but people who've arrived in small boats so far this year is 37,000. There are over 4 million kids in child poverty in the UK, and there are 4.5 million people who can't get a dentist appointment. We spend 90% of the political capital and discourse and media focus discussing 37,000 people. How much more could we achieve if we put that effort into 4.5 million?
Man here in the check shirt.
By far right, does the lady, I don't mean to attack you or anything,
No, sure.
do you mean the general
Lisa.
public? That's my main concern. Because you are labelling ordinary old ladies, old gentlemen, everybody as far right. It's trying to villainise people who are quite frankly, terrified.
Yeah.
You've got hotels, all-you-can-eat buffets. It does not matter, I'm not attacking. Everybody deserves a roof and to eat. And that is a British citizen, that's as a Yorkshire bloke,
Yeah.
we look after each other.
Yeah.
As neighbours, everything. And we do. We've welcomed everybody into this country, and it's made Britain great. But when you are villainising these words by saying that we are far right and things, and coming from Labour, I grew up very much Labour, and I'm struggling to support Labour anymore.
All right, well, let's let her answer.
I'm going off
Lisa,
subject
do you want to...
No, you're not at all. And you make an important point because there's an important distinction here. By far right people protesting about those asylum hotels, you know who I meant? I meant the people who travelled to our town with swastika banners and stood outside the hotels, creating such havoc that in the end, the only threat that the police assessed that there was in the town was the threat from those people to the hotel staff and the asylum seekers. That's what I meant. I don't mean people who live in my town, including me. I bring my family up there. This is my town. This is my family, my friends, my community, who were absolutely incensed by the chaos that we were seeing around us and the fact that the company who placed those asylum seekers in the hotel did so with no regard to their safety and no respect for the community that they were placing them in either. I think that's disgraceful. That's why we're taking action to close those hotels and find a much more suitable solution.
I mean, there are people in Inverness who are saying Labour's not giving them any respect either because they don't want people in those barracks, but I'm just pointing that out. Yes, Faiza.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, I guess, look, there's no doubt that there is absolute chaos in what our asylum system looks like right now. I mean, whether you look at how slow it's been to process the applications or where people are living and what's happened in some of those communities. But I really want to pull you up, Matt, on this point about saying they're often breaking laws. There are, of course, some people that are doing things that are deplorable and wrong and they need to be deported and put in jail and the rest of it. But those are the minority. And I really want to highlight this because I, at Christmas, was invited by this refugee charity local to me in East London and was asked to judge a competition that children were doing. And honestly, these families, some of them had come through irregular routes. They want the same things as us. They want the same things as us. They want their kids to do well in school. They're coming from places like Iraq and Afghanistan, which most of us here have memories long enough to understand that we have a role in why those countries are in a bad way. From Sudan, where there's absolute atrocious things happening on the ground and we don't talk enough about. And UAE is one of the countries involved there, and we sell them arms. So again, this has something to do with us. And we should absolutely just push away this idea that somehow we should be scared of all asylum seekers, because many of them are just normal people trying to escape very horrible, difficult situations and just build a good life for themselves.
Just briefly.
No, you said they're often fines.
There's a group of people that really haven't been mentioned so far, which is the British people. When did it become acceptable to impose an extreme policy of open borders, unvetted illegal migrants coming into the country, nearly 200,000. On the current trends, by the next general election, on the current trends, we will have another 181,000 illegal migrants coming into this country over the next few years. You say they don't commit crime, violence, etc. What do you say to the family of Rhiannon White, the young mother who was murdered by a man from Sudan? What do you say to the family of the 8-year-old in Lambeth who was raped by an asylum seeker? Or the 12-year-old in Nuneaton who was raped by an asylum seeker? Or the 10-year-old in Stockport? But this is the narrative that we have. And if we talk about it, we're far right. If we talk about it, we're racist. And by the way, Lisa, your leader, Keir Starmer, just stood at Labour Party conference and said, if you are voting for the Reform Party, if you want to change this country, you're far right, you're Nazi, you're fascist. No, that's what he said.
Sorry, well, OK, well, you've said what you think. Now, let me tell you what actually happened. See, the thing is, Matt, that I grew up in Manchester in the 1980s. My dad came to this country from India, and we were, and remain, a proud, diverse city that has been strengthened by waves of immigration.
I lived in Manchester, yeah.
And I just say to you, I've seen this playbook before. I agree absolutely with Faiza that the cases that you mentioned are absolutely appalling, horrific, disgraceful. And that's why in one of the cases that you meant that isn't a live court case police investigation at the moment, we took swift action and we removed the guy from the country. But let me just say this to you. I've seen this before. When I was growing up in Manchester, my dad used to debate with Enoch Powell, and we heard the way in which people tried to tar every single person who didn't look like them or sound like them or come from the same place with them as somehow a threat. What you're doing is trying to create fear and distrust and division, because that's the only way that you and your friends can thrive. You have no answers to the very many challenges. No,
I'm not just going to sit here and be compared to Enoch Powell.
Let me finish
Matt, wait one second. Both of you, just wait 1 second. If you talk at the same time, no one can hear anything. Plus, I want to make sure other people speak as well. So very briefly, I appreciate the passion you're speaking with. Finish your point, and then very briefly, Matt, respond.
It's the only playbook you've got, because you've got no real answers to the challenges this country faces, including that list you just read out. The question would be, how are you going to do any of those things? You don't know, you've never answered the question, and so you create fear and distrust and chaos, because that is the only way that you can gain support.
We used to be a country that respected people who played by the rules, and those people in Manchester played by the rules. It's not about race, it's not about ethnicity. What's happening now is we have governments that are incentivising people to break the rule of law, to violate our sense of fairness, and you are the people who are paying for that. 15 billion
well, let's hear from some of them,
is how much you're paying for that.
There's lots of hands up, and I want to hear from some of them. So, man in the grey sweatshirt there, yes.
Matt, you talked about narrative and mentioned the families of victims of some horrific crimes, but a few weeks ago in our country, a Sikh woman was raped on her way to work by 2 white men who told her to go back to her country. What would you say to the victim of that family and the motivation behind that attack? Do British people... do white British people not also commit these violent crimes?
Absolutely.
And is your narrative not that these crimes are only committed by asylum seekers and refugees?
Okay.
Very briefly. I'm interested in evidence. The freedom of information requests that have been submitted, because the government won't give you this data.
You're not actually answering his question, Matt. You're saying, Fiona, what would you say to the family of that woman?
Misinformation, but they won't give you the information about what's going on in the country.
Okay.
The freedom of information requests show...
Matt, you're not answering his question.
I am. If you let me speak, Fiona,
so that Matt
the freedom of information requests show...
who was raped by 2 men who told her to go back to her own country.
Exactly the same thing that I would say to the families of the grooming gang victims. It's horrific and they deserve justice.
So why didn't you bring it up when you brought up all the victims of crimes by asylum seekers?
Matt, I'm going to take it away from you. Harriet?
You talk about narrative, and that is your narrative.
I hear your point. Harriet, you've been sitting here very quietly.
And probably quietly is quite a good word, because one of the reasons why the issue of immigration in the country, asylum hotels in the country, has become so toxic is because people do not listen. They do not recognise that this is in a really difficult, vital, but difficult area which governments have to solve. But because there is so much heat in the argument, because there's so much point scoring in the argument, it's so difficult for anyone to get out of the position that they've got themselves into. Yes.
And do you think the Conservatives are not point scoring on this argument at the moment?
I think that we have actually, in the last 14 months, we have looked at what we did, look at what can be done, and come up with better solutions as to what can be done in the future. And yes...
i.e. they were bad solutions while you were in power?
No, not necessarily. I don't think that at all. We were dealing with a situation that was evolving. We were dealing with a situation where, for example, we suggested using barracks. Labour didn't support that. They do now because they've realised the reality of being in government. Reform will realise the reality if they were to come to government as well. But this is much harder than just a headline, much harder than just trying to set a solution that will get a bit of reaction from the public. And we cannot do this by point scoring. We cannot do this by pitching one against the other, because it has to be a solution where communities feel like they're being listened to, the British public feel like they're being listened to, that healthcare and services which are there to support the British public but are also going to be used by those using the migrant hotels are being used and actually able to support those who need them, with British people at the front of the queue, because that's what is needed too.
And do you think that the Conservative government shares any of the responsibility for the fact that we are in the situation we're in now?
Immigration in the last few years exploded around the world, absolutely. And
no,
yes,
I'm asking about the Conservative government.
And yes, we were not immune to that. We absolutely were not immune to that. We recognise that completely. We did see immigration increase while we were in government. We've seen it increase again this year. Small voter arrivals are already higher this year than they have been in the previous year as well. This is not a one government issue. This is not a 1 or 2 year issue, but it is an issue that we do need to solve, and it's not an issue we will solve by shouting at each other or point scoring at each other.